And one of the things I heard yesterday is, boy, we made a mistake with calling this the Quality Parenting Initiative, QPI. Actually, it's the QPP. It's the Quality Parenting Paradigm, or it's the QPP, Quality Parenting Process, because there is no end. It's constantly in continuity and in motion. And so we're grateful that you're part of this process that has no end, but is always developing. It's also exciting that it's the QPP, the Quality Parenting Partnership, because as I'm listening to what other counties are doing, I am incredibly inspired by, oh, I want to try that, and that, and that, and I need to incorporate all of these new processes. So welcome. Another thing I started thinking about last night is that this could be the QPH model, the Quality Parenting Heart model. And what I mean by that is I'm thinking about, the heart is the central organ in the body that circulates all the blood and all of the oxygen to the entire system. And to me, that's what the quality parenting process is that it is the heart of what we're doing in child welfare. It circulates our knowledge, it circulates our understanding of the centrality of the child's voice, the parent's voice, and the foster parent's voice through every aspect of the process. And so I'm incredibly grateful this morning that when you have a system that requires a heart to circulate all your messages, you really need a good cardiologist in place. And so I'm grateful that in Ventura County we have a phenomenal cardiologist by the name of Deputy Director Judy Weber, and she's here today. And it really, QPI is top to bottom and bottom up. We have to have leadership from the top that really sees this is priority. Everything we do, all the training we do with our social workers, every aspect of how we do process procedures has to be embedded with the QPI understanding and knowledge. And so I'm grateful we have a deputy director who really has that. And similarly, it's bottom up. It's our caregivers telling us, you have got to change the way you're doing things. It's our birth family saying, this is not working for me, you are not engaging me in the process. It is the child saying, hey, what about how I'm feeling today and this week and this month, and this isn't working for me. And so we're really through QPI systemically top to bottom and bottom to up circulating the QPI message. So welcome Judy Weber, our wonderful cardiologist.
Hi, good morning everybody. Wow, I've never been referred to as a cardiologist before. I'll take it. I'll take it. Lack of 2 years in school, I'll take it. So great to see so many of you here today. A lot of faces that I recognize. If I don't get a chance to meet many of you who I haven't had a chance to meet, I would love to do that. It really is my honor and privilege to welcome you here to the Quality Parenting Process Conference on behalf of the Department of Children and Family Services here in Ventura County. We are so excited to be one of 18 counties that are participating in this national movement about guiding child welfare agencies and caregiving partners to ensure that families and kids have the support that they need, not just to be okay, not to just be well, but so that they can thrive. And so we're really striving for that higher standard. The Quality Parenting Initiative is an approach to strengthening families by refocusing on excellent parenting for all children in the child welfare system. QPI recognizes that the excellent parenting effort requires reliable support systems, strong partnerships, and open communication between children, caregivers, birth families, relatives, and of course the child welfare staff who is here to serve you. It is very important for us here in Ventura County Children and Family Services, and we recognize that foster and relative caregivers are an essential partner to the care and support of children in foster care. They provide homes with a heart for children who need love, consistency, and support when they're separated from their parents. We also recognize that we sometimes fail to provide caregivers and you, our partners, with the information and communication and partnership that you also need in order to help our caregivers be successful. So we really want to make efforts to change that. Through our QPI partnership plan, Ventura County is implementing some really significant practice changes. Those changes are in alignment with a national reform movement in child welfare. And we hope that they will enhance our partnership with caregivers and families QPI commitments impact how our practices align with our beliefs to support quality parenting and child-centered approaches in order for us to have successful reunifications. Right now, I want to share with you our beliefs here in Ventura County, and we've incorporated all of these beliefs into our QPR partnership plan. The first one is that we believe families can keep their children safe with support. The second is we believe children should be cared for in a familiar, nurturing, and safe environment with a relative or a nurturing adult. Number 3, we believe every child is entitled to thrive through stability, family connections, quality treatment, and a voice in planning. Number 4, we believe that through partnership and support, parents can grow and change in order to safely parent their children. We believe that all children deserve a sense of belonging and permanent and unconditional commitment to a lifelong family. QPI aims to strengthen foster care by ensuring that a foster caregiver provides the loving, committed, and skilled care that a child needs, while working effectively with the child welfare system to achieve the child's goals. QPI also seeks to clearly define and articulate the responsibilities of caregivers and to align child welfare policies and practices with quality foster care. It has resulted in systemic changes and improved relationships between youth in foster care and their caregivers. We've seen measurable improvements in the areas of fewer unplanned placement changes, reduced use of group care, fewer cases of sibling separation, and more successful instances of reunification. So we are excited to have you here joining us in our beautiful Paradise by the Sea. We invite you to learn more about how together we can protect children by strengthening families. Welcome.
So much of the success of QPI rests on the role of leadership. And I think everybody knows QPI, the Youth Law Center, does this work in partnership with the California Department of Social Services and with CWDA. And so what that leadership that we rely on to really make QPI work involves is it involves leaders setting a vision for the system that believes that every single child deserves great parenting. It also means that leaders have to be willing to engage everyone from families to youth to agency staff into buying into that vision. And most importantly, the success of QPI rests on leaders being able to take risks to make the changes involved with really disruptive and transformative policy that changes the way that we currently do our work in child welfare to make that vision a reality. And then most importantly, to make sure that we prioritize seeing those changes through no matter how challenging or how sticky those changes can get. And I just want to say that from the Youth Law Center's perspective and from QPI perspective, no one better exemplifies this than Will and his efforts to see through CCR and to change our state policy in the legislation that's currently moving forward in AB 403 to make sure that youth are not growing up in congregate care and that have the supports necessary to thrive in families. We've been really, really honored this year to support Will's leadership in moving that through, and all of the staff who are here from CDSS as they prepare to do their sort of disruptive and transformative work within their agency. And I don't think it's any secret to anybody who's here that the Youth Law Center's work to support the capacity of child welfare to offer excellent parenting, that grew out of our efforts to limit congregate care use, both here in California and across the country. We really see CCR as foundation to both establishing the protections that are necessary for the healthy development of children, but most importantly to beginning to create that roadmap, the new roadmap for how our child welfare system should operate. I want to say I have personal gratitude and admiration to Will, as this represents a movement, CCR does, that has been so long in the making and has felt like it was probably never going to be possible to achieve. Some of you may know I shared with the youth from CYC last night that the first piece of legislation that I ever worked on was the Foster Youth Bill of Rights. That was 16 years ago. And what folks may not realize is actually that Bill of Rights started off as a group home Bill of Rights, And what the youth in CYC wanted to do were actually create the exact same policies that are now moving forward in AB 403. And that we're really hopeful that the governor will soon sign. And I cared about that, not only because I myself grew up in congregate care, but because it felt over the years like while the rest of the system really evolved, that we kept hearing year after year after year that youth who were in congregate care, they were exempt from all of those changes. Their experiences seemed to stay the same. Year after year, we heard from youth stories about being supervised instead of parented in facilities. We heard about having to overcome the impact of institutional environment and institutional policies, and really feeling like they were left out of our efforts and our thoughtfulness to ensure a family for every single youth. So over the years, thousands of CYC youth really built the foundation on which AB 403 was built. And it would have been absolutely impossible to get this far without Will's thoughtful vision, his willingness to listen and to engage, and his absolute commitment to moving child welfare to ensure that every single child gets that parenting and family that they deserve. And I just want to say that Will's leadership doesn't just inspire and impact youth here in California, that leaders from across the country are watching very carefully what is happening, and they're feeling inspired to make similar changes in their states and their systems. And while I know that the work is just beginning, and I want to emphasize that, we know that this is just the beginning, I just want to acknowledge how amazing it is that we've been able to actually and finally start the work. That's pretty incredible. So please join me in appreciating, admiring, and welcoming Will to our convening today.
Wow, well, definitely can't live up to that. But good morning, and thank you for having me here for a bit this morning. Here's my suggestion. I think quality parenting movement, because it has felt to me since I first became involved with Kathy Huerta and with Carol Schofer and with Jennifer in this effort, that it really was building a movement. And it was a movement in very large part because it's a learning experience where we're all learning together, and it's growing and building on itself. And so that's just the most fulfilling sensation of all the work we get to do. I want to say thank you to the QPI parents, to the QPI county leadership, because you have framed the conversation in which everything else is really happening. The whole concept of the continuum of care reform that Jennifer was referring to, that is starting its implementation process now, is really built on the teaching that the QPI experience has spread across the state, that we can achieve a very high quality of care for children in a family-based setting from committed, nurturing, and possibly permanent homes if we do so in partnership. And if we're really committed to what that partnership means. And so none of this would have begun without that. Maybe it is a paradigm too, that sort of paradigmatic breakthrough. So what is the continuum of care reform, and as it builds off the energy of QPI? It's taking to heart what we have known for a very long time, that children do much, 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 much better in family home-based settings. Committed families, nurturing families, parenting families. In order to make that a reality, we have to do certain things. We have to know what the child's needs are, so that we are starting out with a child with a family that is well suited to that situation. We have to know what the child's needs are so that we can get to the child and to the family, and almost always, we assume in the home-based setting, the services that the child needs and the family needs for it to be successful. And we need to intervene promptly when those life moments occur that change needs, and not have those lingering in need of response beyond the point where it's a sustainable relationship. To do this, and I'm sort of getting into sort of what the basic framework of what this CCR construction is. We're building, it must be built on good, robust, and repeated assessments and planning cycles for the child that involve the child, involve the family, involve the caregivers, involve the people who know and love the child. It's a child-family team, and that participation is essential for good assessment and good planning. One of our commitments in the continuum of care reform is that we will sort of statewide have, if not the identical assessment instruments, that's something which we'll work through in the next months, instruments that are using the same domains and the same methodology and involving child and family in the assessment process. And it really is sort of a 360-degree system. We have to have the readily available services, and particularly the readily available mental health services. These are necessary both to make it possible for a child to safely and successfully be in the home placement when needs arise, but also to return to a home placement if there are interruptions. And with the recognition that there are circumstances under which a child's needs may be so acute that a very structured environment is necessary to provide treatment and services safely for the child. What CCR does is we move from what we've historically thought of as a group home environment to what we're characterizing, and it's a lumpy phrase, but it has meaning, short-term residential treatment centers. And the emphasis on short-term and treatment. The goal being that we don't want to have children fail up to high levels of care. We want to provide what care they need when they need it, but the intention has to be that it starts and remains an agenda which is time limited, is planned for return to home-based care, and it's a treatment that corresponds to the needs of the child. This is not a situation which will come into existence instantly, and we fully foresee a period of 2 to 3 years in which we're going to be transforming some of the existing institutions to serve that purpose. And after which we expect to see the institutions that don't fulfill that need start to leave the field. Because we do not want to see children, as Jennifer was pointing to, living in non-treatment based residential congregate facilities in the future out-of-home care system of California. The assessments, instruments, the mental health constructions, the STRTCs, these are things that at state level, county level, we will be working on. But there's a huge underlying challenge, and it's the one that everyone at every stage in the conversation on CCR has either started with as a question or ended with as a question, which is, do we have the homes? Do we have the families? Is this realistic in that environment? And it's a legitimate question, and I think it's probably the hardest challenge of them all. So here's what your movement has taught us. The core, like I said earlier, is partnership. Partnership based on standards that we know we are not talking about a bed, we're talking about a home and family. Standards, partnership based on mutual expectations that the child welfare system has to clearly meet the needs of the family and the child and do it reliably and in a supportive fashion. And there has to be accountability for that. And the QPI partnership agreement, I always thought it was semi-inspired document in that it so clearly lays out both the, not just the, there are aspirations and then there are standards. And I see the QPI partnership document as being a very pragmatic statement of these are standards. They're not wishes and hopes. This is going to happen. And in fulfilling that, there is that accountability. From there, we set the groundwork and the stage to accomplish what we see as fulfilling the challenge of having the homes. And that starts with retention of the quality homes we have. If we can't keep the people who are now giving of themselves, then we cannot possibly hope to have the families we need for the future. Once we are clear on that, then recruitment of foster family homes, quality, nurturing, committed homes, becomes a challenge, but a doable challenge. And I say doable largely because everything that we have seen tells us that the most successful recruitment of new quality homes is done by existing quality homes. It's done either through known networks or through support or through affirmation. And if we can fulfill our partnership agreement, we are much further down the line to being able to take that next step of going past retention into recruitment. And then there is the preparation and the support. And when we look at the items built into the partnership agreement, it speaks very concretely to things. The training should be relevant and value-added and immediate. And that the whole processes of transitions must be planful and involving and include the voice of the family. And then there are areas that have been sensitive and coming up in conversations we've been having through the QPI communication process. Information sharing. We've got to get past this belief that somehow we've got stacks of information we can't disclose to anybody else. No one can possibly parent someone whose circumstances and needs they don't know. And we have to get over our fear level around these things. We have to frame the process of conflict resolution in one of being conflict resolution, not being investigation and punishment. This is particularly the case as we think about the CCR construction, when the youth who are in what I refer to as low-level group care tend to be adolescent. When we set out with a firm commitment that we are going to phase out that system of care and have those youth cared for in family homes, most of us, have had the experience of caring for adolescents, and we've all been adolescents, and we know what it means. It's a volatile population. It's a population going through changes that have to do with biology and all sorts of other stuff. And there are inherently in that conflicts and volatility. And our system has to evolve to the point that as those are occurring, we're approaching the conflict from being, so what do we do to help resolve the conflict? Yeah. Not take sides in conflict. An example I'll give you from AB 403, which is the piece of legislation that's carrying forward CCR, is we built in a provision that said respite care or care outside the foster family home could be for as long as 2 weeks, and as opposed to 3 days. Now that was tied very specifically to the provision, if necessary to preserve the placement. So it's absolutely not intended as a leave the kids here while we go off and do something for ourselves. It is intended for if we need a timeout, if everybody needs to get a little bit of distance, we can do it. That's how families operate. I've definitely spent a couple of weeks in my older brother's home at points along the way, which were probably very constructive at the end of the day, and my mother and father and I are the better for it. That's the way I think we have to be approaching where we are moving in this future environment. We have to be much clearer about prudent parenting standards and be supportive of the fact that we have as a goal normalizing child experiences, but then the message that frequently goes is a mixed message. And that clarifying those expectations and those standards and those reliable mutual accountabilities is something that we're engaged with now. It all sounds hard and difficult, and it is, and we're going to work it out and figure it out and do it with your help. And that's not just a sort of a moral support help, although I feel that and have been feeling that for, since I went to CDSS. It's a very tangible support, and starting as early as yesterday with some focus group conversation that QPI and the California Foster and Adoptive Family Association cooperated to do with our staff. The feedback on, so what is it that retains a good home? What is it that alienates a good home? What has to be the circumstance before you're comfortable bringing friends into the movement? That was the beginning of a very specific dialogue that we intend to be continuing into the future. We expect to continue to do it both one-on-one and also through surveys, which we'll try to get out and give people the opportunity to respond to us, either with specifics and self-identified or without specifics and sort of more aggregated than that, but whichever way. I wanted to recognize here today both the county staff who have come from the counties across the state that are involved in the movement. And I've certainly already seen a number of whom I recognize from all sorts of past lives. And good to see you guys. I also wanted to just talk about some of the state staff who are here because it will speak to where we're going. We have Greg Rose, who's the Deputy Director for Child Family Services for the state, and staff from his team. We have Pat Leary, who is the Chief Deputy Director of the Department of Social Services, and she oversees the functions in the state, which the state directly carries out. We have Pam Dickfuss, who is the Deputy Director for the state over community care licensing. And there are members of her team here who are here to listen and learn what we have to do different and better. I don't mean better that we've been doing badly. I mean what we have to do differently for better outcomes going into the future. We have Tori Schwab, who's the Chief Counsel for the department, and staff from her legal team. These are the people who have to draft the information sharing, the prudent parenting regulations as we move into this next phase of out-of-home care in California. So I point them out, and Angela Valdez, the head of the Children's Licensing Bureau, and others, because I really want you to know that we see this as a partnership that is completely critical to our ability to move this agenda forward. And that we have no higher priority, and we're immensely grateful for the time you've given to informing teaching, growing, supporting, motivating, challenging, and ultimately celebrating with us. So, thank you very much.
So we've already started to receive some questions. Again, there's notepads in the center of the table. If you have questions, go ahead and write those and just raise your hand and David's gonna come around and grab some from you. So to start off with here, well, there is a question about how foster families will be involved in reviewing and commenting and giving feedback on any allocation of CCR funds. The comment is that foster parents need direct services like intensive treatment foster care availability, respite care, non-police crisis support, special education and school discipline advocacy help, funding for extracurricular activities for youth. But so often when funding is available, it goes to find just a new position in the county. How will this be different and what are the foster parent opportunities to weigh in?
This is what again, much of what is going to be starting in this year is the sort of local on-the-ground capacity building, the development of recruitment strategies, the expectation that we are having with counties, and we're sort of putting up sort of a planning instrument, template, questionnaire with a series of questions and prompts. And what is it that will best make it possible for quality foster parents to come into the system? How do you, in your particular county, know what the answer to that question is and talk to the foster parents? And what are the needs that they have described to you? Some of those may be soluble immediately in terms of short-term responses. Some may have to involve sort of the next stage of legislation and what we budget for in the next fiscal year. But what we need is real sort of tangible feedback at the local level so that as each county develops its own recruitment, retention, and support plan, and I keep doing it in that order: recruitment, retention, and support. If we can't, retention, recruitment, and support. If we can't retain, we can't recruit. So we have to.
And well, can you speak a little to what your vision is for what the process is going to be at the county level to get feedback and make sure that that feedback is elevated up?
Yes, I mean, what we are asking the counties to do is to submit their, not just 1 year, but multi-year action plans for saying, how many homes does County X need to have 2 years from now, 3 years from now, 4 years from now, given however many youth will no longer be cared for in congregate care, and given just whatever is the natural turnover in terms of families who have completed an adoption and are leaving the fostering system, or families who are moving out of the area, or families who, for reasons of age or other personal circumstances, are no longer available. So that there really is a sort of very concrete, it's not just a broad aspirational thing, saying we need 12 families who can take teenage girls between the age of 13 and 15. What do those families need in order to care for those girls? How do we know that's what they need? Who have we talked to? Which families who are now caring for those children have we consulted on this? And so we'll be looking into counties on that. No one's going to get it right to the nth detail the first time around. But that's got to be an iterative process as we go forward, so that there really is a informed set of plans that are realistic in terms of meeting people's needs. I mean, I know from one county already, which we've been in dialogue with, they are very concerned about the availability of childcare as being a primary problem, to which I'm totally supportive and willing to affirm. But the other question is So let's tie the issue of childcare to the issue of adolescents who are coming out of group care. Is childcare the solution to that need issue? Let's just be sure that we're naming the need and not fulfilling something which has sort of been on an agenda for a long time and may not now be covered.
Great, thank you.
A related question is, how does CPSS plan to continue to incorporate youth voice throughout the implementation process? And are there plans to really encourage youth participation in decision-making processes as youth are transferring out of congregate care, to give them really a role in their placement and the way that services are provided?
Yes, in terms of sort of the youth voice in policy making, in the development of the continuing care reform document and goals and concepts, CYC, among other youth groups, was at the table throughout the conversation. As part of CCR, we've sort of committed to, we were doing a count earlier this week, I think we've committed ourselves to 6 separate stakeholder processes at different points, but in each case, youth are going to be in those processes. This is at the state level around implementation. In terms of the role of youth in their individual circumstance, that's the core significance of the child family team. And the goal is to be sure that the child's voice, so long as we're not talking about a very, very young child, but that the child's voice is solicited, is listened to, is paid attention to, and their preferences go into the next steps. One of the things that in the resource family approval construct, which I know there was a presentation on yesterday, is a question is posed by someone: why are we putting so much emphasis on having the larger social assessment of the family? And in very large part, it's so that when the youth has expressed what their preferences and needs are, do we now know enough about families to know this is the right setting? This is a family with similar values, similar assumptions, similar rulemaking. This is the way a family deals with issues of discipline and authority. Let's be sure that we have got the youth's voice as clearly in that conversation as we can.
So there's a number of questions concerned about children who are struggling with serious mental health issues. And so the comments are concerns about where those children will go, how to make sure that those children get the mental health services necessary, what efforts are being made to ensure that children are getting the services mandated by KDA, that intensive treatment foster care is available in counties. It sounds like there are some struggles in actually having agencies that are willing and able to certify and families to provide those services. So can you speak a little bit to that population?
Yes, I'm sort of looking over Greg Rose because I hope during the course of the day people will also engage with Greg, who is sort of at the heart of a lot of the detailed work on this. As I said earlier, assuring that mental health services are available as needed, both mild to moderate as well as acute, are essential for this work. And we're working in very close partnership with our healthcare services, which is now responsible for the mental health and behavioral health system for the state. For extreme situations, that's where we envision the STRTC type residential short-term treatment coming into play. So we'll be working with county mental health structures to certify those providers. We're trying to find what the needs are by location and be sure that the supply is good and that the services are high quality. As the evaluation instruments are put in place and also as the routine child assessments are routinized, the expectation is we will have a quickly increasing sense of which providers are good at treating which needs. Every provider can't treat every needs. When you sort of look at how some states have mapped provider capacity versus child needs, there's the examples of states that we've looked at. No state can point to a provider that meets all needs well. So depending on our knowledge of a child's need, we have to be clear that they're getting what they need where they need it. In terms of services in the home, that's where the working with both the existing mental health departments as well as having them working with our provider networks is essential. Part of the legislation that we're expecting the government to sign in the next week or two is specifically allowing counties to work with FFAs that now only work with their own certified ones to make it possible for them to deliver supportive services, mental health-based services into county licensed homes and relative group homes. That's sort of an important first step in being able to connect the mental health services to where the child is. A huge part of the commitment behind CCR is we don't want to move the child in order for the child to get services, which has been a large part of the historic pattern. Nor do we want to fail the child up because they weren't getting the services they needed, and so the child's going to higher and higher levels of care, disrupting bonds and relationships they've been trying to build. Instead, the goal is to get those services to the right place at the right time. It's not going to happen instantly. There's going to be, I confidently predict, 2, 3, 4 years of getting the different systems fully synchronized. There's an absolute commitment to do it.
Thank you, and just as a follow-up comment, there's also several comments that are about that very issue, the right time, about the timeliness, how difficult it is to get mental health services in a timely way, and when those services are provided to that often foster parents are not engaged and sort of involved in the mental health treatment services, and whether there will be an effort made to promote that.
Yes, I mean, one of the reasons why the stress is on having the services provided in the home, in the community, is precisely because it's not usually a situation where just the child needs to be engaged. The child's operating in an ecology which they're affecting. And for that to have its greatest healing potentials, the services have to engage the caregivers, siblings, and the child.
Thank you.
Can you please describe in detail the differences between current group homes and this new short-term residential treatment center? And what does short-term mean? What will the length of stay look like?
Short-term in this setting, in the legislation, we're saying, at point of entry, a youth, if a youth is admitted to a short-term treatment residential center, they must have a plan that spells out the services they're to receive, the duration of those the expected duration of those services, and what is the step-down plan from there, their return to home-based care. Any placement at an STRTC that is exceeding 6 months, we're requiring that it have deputy director level review and approval at the county, so that we're not talking about drift. Now, there's 6 months is not sacred. There may be circumstances where therapies that take longer than 6 months. So it is not a presumed guilty. If it has gone, the county is presumed guilty or anything, if it's gone longer than 6 months. But it needs a higher level of review. Now, for implementation in the juvenile probation system, because this also applies to probation kids who are in foster care, the timeframes are less specific and rather refer to sort of ongoing probation review. Candidly, our colleagues in juvenile probation are starting, they were in the last decade of these conversations to a great degree. For them, group care is a step down from locked care, from the whole of the ranch. So building their capacity and their comfort level with stepping down to relative care is something which we'll be working with them over the next 2 years on a slightly separate time frame than the child welfare. But in terms of the time frame for child welfare, it's a 6-month review that has to be authorized at a high level. In terms of what would differentiate group homes from this level of care, we're saying SDRTCs must, if they're serving the child welfare population, they must have mental health certification as being an approved mental health reviewer. And we are assuming that in almost all cases they will need contracts for the provision of mental health services in the facility.
Thank you. Another related question is around, can you discuss over the next year what the CDSS's plan is for really engaging foster parents and dealing with a couple of the real retention issues that discourage foster parents from wanting to care for this population of youth, and specifically a couple of comments about implementation of the prudent parent standard, that foster parents are discouraged from doing things like being able to take their child out of county or allowing them to participate in extracurricular activities. And then additionally, that foster parents are often afraid to take youth who have been categorized as more hard to place, because if they do teenage things, they're worried that licensing will investigate and they'll have complaints against them for things that are just really normal teenage behaviors.
Yes and yes. Those are right up there on our list of things that we know have to get resolved. In very large part, that's why Pam and Angela and Tori and Pat are here today, is to sort of hear the detail of that. And they've already been very engaged in dialogue through the QPI webinars and then with Jennifer and the Youth Law Center around how we can rewrite the regulations to be as flexible as possible while still protecting children. Another piece that we want to sort of look at as a sort of a future opportunity for how we, particularly with the older kids, deal with volatility and conflict questions, is folk may have heard that Karen Grace Cable, who's a long-time foster care ombudsman, is retiring. And as we look to the Ombudsman Office function of the future, I really want to give it an emphasis where it is, how can it play the mediation role where there is conflict? There are other issues which the Ombudsman has to deal with that have to do with genuine denial of youth rights, etc. And that's an important function. But increasingly want to see us use that capacity and the foster youth, former foster youth who are themselves working in the Ombudsman program as problem solvers, to build a new way of approaching it. That we're not dealing with it clients licensing issue, we're dealing with it as families have conflicts. Let's see what we do to straighten them.
So we have a number of questions related to transition. So there's a question about if there will be any changes to how children are transferred from county to county, and additionally a question about whether you have any plans to create a statewide transition protocol that counties are encouraged to follow so that every child has a meaningful transition, particularly for those that are transitioning out of group care into a family.
In terms of the transitions from group care to families, that is part of what's being worked on right now. And we'll be engaging very closely with CWDA, staff, leadership, the children's deputies, et cetera, to sort of try to figure out how specific and how flexible the approaches should be, and there are good arguments both directions. In terms of the issue of transitions of youth who are in family placement to either reunification or some other placement, those are the sorts of things I want to see populated out through, whether it's branded everywhere as the Quality Parenting Initiative, or whether it's just partnership agreements that are modeled on it, spelling out exactly the sort of terms for how that is to be handled. What is the appropriate way of involving the caregiving family in decisions about changes? What are the important days and events, and the method of keeping communication if a child leaves a home? How is contact maintained? How do foster siblings maintain long-term relationships? So that's something I think we're all going to be working on together.
Thank you.
We have a question about buy-in into QPI. So a couple questions here. What's your plan to get all directors to not only support QPI, but to pass on the practice throughout their agency? And similarly, how are FFAs going to be brought into QPI and RFA, or have they already been?
There are several parts there. For the FFAs, our sort of race and audits and licensing folk are doing a lot of work with the FFA community now to bring them into the resource family approval process, help them understand what their roles are, how to fulfill it, that it is same, it's not different. And that will just be unfolding in the months ahead. In that sort of broader sense of how do we move the QPI movement and values through the counties as a whole. It was actually, I think, an excellent first start a month or so ago. I meet with the county directors almost every month, and I sort of joined their meeting midway in progress. And just as I joined the meeting, Tracy from San Luis Obispo was wrapping up her presentation on both QPI and RFA, and in ways I could never have expressed it or explained it. You could see the directors who weren't yet part of this just, wide-eyed, and it's an ugly image that's sort of licking your chocolate. Really, and it'll be both ways. At the beginning of the morning, we said bottom up, top down, side to side. That's what it's going to take to do it. I totally affirm that it's going to have to be leadership from every level. CDSS, county directors, county child welfare directors have to really, really, really own this. But we also have to push the movements. Don't wait for their leaders. What's the old thing? Lead, follower, get out of the way. So it's all. I think my final comment would be, again, thank you. Sometimes we separate the world into pioneers and settlers. You're both, which is extraordinary and incredibly important for what we have ahead of us. So thank you.